Hi everyone, welcome back to my Curious Kitchen. I'm Claire and today we are making Miso Saltine Toffee. Saltine toffee is one of my favorite things to eat this time of year, but I've always found it a little too sweet. I remember I used to double the layer of saltines to try to cut the sweetness a little, but today I'm adding miso to the toffee to help cut the sweetness, add some umami flavors, and really make a delicious toffee. Now this recipe is fairly simple. There's only a handful of ingredients. So I want to take a little time to talk about why the sugar in toffee is not the same as the sugar that came out of the bag. So the sugar in this bag comes in lots of tiny solid crystals. So let's take a closer look at each crystal. Now, I built my little stack of chocolate here, but each square of chocolate represents a molecule of sucrose. So like we talked about in the ginger snap video, sucrose is just the specific chemical that makes up white sugar. So in a sugar crystal, we have lots of sucrose molecules stacked in a really neat, organized fashion. And that makes up the crystal. And anything that is a solid, ice, salt, baking soda, they're solid because their molecules form this neat, organized structure. Now when we add heat to sugar or to ice, it melts because these sucrose molecules separate and lose their organized structure. So now our sugar is a liquid. And if we continue to heat this up, what happens actually is that the sucrose molecules break down. We can think of them as these crumbs here on the plate. The sucrose molecules break down into lots of different compounds, and that's what gives caramel its brown color and its distinctive taste. So caramelized sugar, like the sugar in toffee, is actually chemically different from the sugar that first came out of the bag. So we can make caramel by just putting sugar over heat and heating it until it melts and then caramelizes and breaks down. But that only really works for darker caramels. For candies and for lighter caramels, we need better control over the heat distribution. So the most common method to use for those is to dissolve the sugar in water and then cook that syrup. So when we dissolve sugar in water, what happens is water and sugar really like each other. So we have our sugar crystal, we dump it into water, and all the molecules, the water molecules go like, oh my gosh, it's sugar, we love sugar! And then they come in and then they grab individual sucrose molecules off the crystal and scatter them far, far away from each other throughout the entire solution. And so this is different from melted sugar because there's water in here, but the sucrose molecules have separated from each other. Now when we cook this syrup over heat, the water starts to evaporate. So now we're getting less and less water. The sucrose molecules come back closer and closer together, and now they're at really high risk of recrystallizing and reforming their nice, organized structure. So when we make candies and light caramels, we have a lot of different strategies for preventing the sugar from recrystallizing, because what we want are the broken down sugar sucrose crumbs, not the sugar crystals. Now, toffee is basically caramelized sugar with a lot of butter in there. And so as we're making it, we want to make sure we don't get sugar crystals. Now, as we're making this recipe, it's probably not going to happen. We don't really have to think about it. And part of that reason is because of the ingredients we're using. So butter, for example, is a lot of fat, and fat actually prevents crystals from forming because once the sugar is dissolved, fat actually lubricates each of these sucrose molecules so that even if they kind of swing by each other in the mixture, they can't really bond together because there's butter in between them and they can't reform their crystals. Now, brown sugar also prevents the sugar from recrystallizing because, like we talked about last week, it contains sucrose, but it also contains a little fructose. So let's add some fructose to the mixture. So fructose is a different sugar from sucrose. So at the molecular level, they look different. And what this means in our dissolved sugar syrup is that the sucrose has a really hard time recrystallizing. The fructose doesn't fit in with the crystal, and the sucrose doesn't know what to do, and the sugar can't reform their nice little stacks because the fructose just doesn't fit in. Alright, so now that we kind of know what's happening at the chemical level, let's talk about our ingredients. So of course, I have plenty of butter and sugar, brown sugar, in my pot here. I have a tray or a baking pan lined with saltine crackers. I have my chocolate, and of course I have my miso. So for this recipe, I'm using white miso, which has a more mild flavor because it hasn't been fermented for as long as other types of miso, like red miso. So miso is essentially a fermented soybean condiment that comes from Japan. Alright, let's get started. So I'm just heating my butter and brown sugar together. Alright, our mixture is boiling. I'm just going to turn off the heat and then add in my miso and whisk that in until it's smooth. And now that it's smooth, I'm just going to pour it over my saltines. I'm going to spread this out and pop it in the oven. So once our sugar is dissolved in water, something else that makes it likely to recrystallize is agitation or stirring. So that's why often in a lot of candy recipes, once you dissolve the sugar, you don't want to touch it that much. But as you saw, we whisked in the miso with no problem. That's largely thanks to all of the butter that's in there. But if you want to learn more about how agitation can cause the sugar to recrystallize, I talk about it in a lot more detail on my blog, so check it out. So with most toffee recipes, you would just cook the sugar and butter until it's the right color, pour it out, and let it cool. But because we're using saltines in this recipe, we actually want to bake the sugar to the right temperature. So I actually tried this, you can check it out on the blog, but if you don't bake the saltines, they actually end up soaking up a lot of the butter and getting all greasy and not as appetizing. But if you bake it, the fat kind of like soaks into the layers and puffs the layers a little bit, and so you get crispy crackers under your toffee. You want to watch it pretty closely, especially the first time, because the miso makes it a little more likely to burn. But you just want the toffee to start bubbling a little bit. Alright, if your crackers get out of place, you can touch them back a little to get a smooth surface. But the last step is just to sprinkle on some chocolate chips. You can just let them melt in the heat, or you can pop it back into the oven for a few minutes to warm the chocolate up. Okay, so I used dark chocolate on these because that's my favorite, but of course you can use whatever you want, and I just like to add a little white chocolate for some decoration on top, but again, that's up to you. So now I'm just going to let these cool so the chocolate hardens, and then we can slice it into squares or triangles or just break it up into pieces. Okay, these are ready to eat. I really hope you give these a try. The recipe is linked down below to my blog, and I'll see you next time. Let's get started. So I'm just gonna heat my butter and sugar. That's not right. All right, now these are ready to enjoy. Okay, we're all done. These are ready to enjoy. I hope you try them out. I really love these. All right, these are ready to eat. I hope you give them a try. I really like these.